So we're going to get a little expansive here in the last couple sessions. So we're going to be talking about AI and then psychedelics. And then one of the founders of AI, Wojciech, is going to come and talk about where the world is going based on his experience of AI and building the next new models and what that means for society. So, and we'll talk with Didi about a different perspective maybe on AI and ethics and religion and spirituality. So if you're watching online or with us in person, that's kind of the rest of the day is AI and then psychedelics and then kind of more AI. And I think probably they're actually more connected than we think. But the conversations that we'll be having will be kind of exploring how consciousness is emerging in our world today. And will AI be a new consciousness that will also emerge? And how do we dance with what seemingly is a new intelligence? We're not really launching a new technology, we're launching a new intelligence. And what does that mean for society? And how do we navigate with this force that could potentially destroy us or also could potentially like solve every health problem in the world?
Yeah.
We don't know, or both.
Yeah.
So I was curious before we kind of begin to just introduce you and introduce kind of like your work and your studies and your areas of interest. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. I am currently an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology at Santa Clara University, and I study the intersection between religion and technology. In my earlier work, I interviewed tech workers in China and the US, asked them whether they see religion as having the potential to provide them with some ethical framework in the tech workplace. And in more recent research, I interviewed these individuals, such as atheist social media influencers and religious and spiritual social media influencers, to see how they navigate with technology on social media. So that is a very brief, overarching introduction of my research journey.
So how do the tech workers view religion and spirituality? Because often it feels like the assumption is that, my assumption is that tech workers actually do not really care so much about religion and spirituality. But what did you find?
Your assumption is partially correct.
Is that right?
Yeah. If we look at the religiosity, let us say in Silicon Valley, in the most traditional sense, then Silicon Valley is one of the most secular places in the United States. There is a low percentage of individuals who identify themselves as being religious. Low percentage of individuals who say that they participate in religious services on a regular basis, but a relatively high percentage of individuals who say they are not religious or are even atheist. But what surprised me when I did my research is how tech workers in both China and the US have very contested views on the place of religion in their tech workplace. It is indeed the truth that many tech workers are not religious, but they do not want to completely exclude religion from their workplace. Many of them were born and raised in a religious background or even in religious families, although they are not religious anymore. And they still think that there are some facets about religion that can be helpful to them. So they experience a lot of uncertainties and a pressure working in tech. They want to rely on religion as a coping mechanism. And they also want to rely on religion as a social entity that can partially fill in the ethical vacuum that they experience in the tech workplace. But they are also really cautious about completely introducing religion to their workplace. And part of the reason that they were cautious about it is they are worrying that introducing religious ethics into the tech workplace can take away their ethical autonomy.
Okay.
So I have one respondent who said that, oh, I have a colleague who is deeply religious, and I see this person as very ethical, but I see that example as, quoting his words, a good outcome from a sad journey, because he wants to make sure that it is tech workers themselves making the ethical decisions rather than following a settled guideline provided by religion. So I will say, yes, indeed, tech workers are not religious. In general, there is a low percentage of tech workers who are religious, but they have very contested views on the place of religion in the tech workplace and also have very complex relationship with religion.
And so I want to ask you about China, but where do you see this all going? Will there be an AI religion? Like is the next spiritual teacher an AI, and is that a good thing or a bad thing?
This is an excellent question, and it is something that I truly want to explore as my next research project.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. because what we see is that there are indeed quite a bit of individuals who turn to Gen AI chatbot for religion-related questions or interpretation of religious discourses. And if we think about what happened before the birth of, or before the expansive usage of these Gen AI chatbots, it is these leaders in faith communities who are providing the faithful with interpretations of religious texts, answer their questions and confusions related to religion and spirituality. And now users turn to Gen AI chatbots for such information. So can we say that religion becomes algorithmic? Is it the algorithms rather than religious leaders who are deciding what type of information to be provided to the faithful individuals? And are algorithms really starting to play an increasingly salient role in our spirituality and in our religiosity? And these are the type of questions that I am deeply curious about, and I want to study more in my future research. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I do not have a firm answer on that. And
I have some answers, but because I think now you can pretty much pull up any, like, can I have a conversation with Jesus? And it's like, sure. And it's like, it has Jesus' writings and teachings, and then there's like a conversation that can have. And is that good advice or not good advice? I don't know, but I think people are then saying, okay, well, let me get Lao Tzu's opinion on this, right? So there's an accessibility that the AI provides. But there's a downside in the sense that there's not a human connection and a community that maybe exists there. So could you say a little bit about like where you think the role for a kind of community or human connection, or when people are looking for religion, what does that actually, or spirituality, what does that actually mean? And is it just information, or what is it that is kind of like a true spirituality or true like experience of the divine?
Yeah, I am primarily a sociologist of religion. So in our previous research, what we found is that community is an integral component in people's religious experiences. And there are some individuals who go to their faith communities not necessarily only for these connections with the divine, but for a sense of community. And now with this growth of Gen AI and Gen AI chatbot, we do not know to what extent it will change people's experiences with religion. So from a researcher's perspective, what we can do is to interview these people who start to turn to these Gen AI chatbots about their experiences with the birth of these Gen AI chatbots. Do you think that an important component of your religious experience, which is community and this humanized connection, has been taken away? Or do you think that you get closer connections with the divine or spirituality in your interactions with Gen AI chatbots? Maybe it is only through hearing the voices and narratives from these individuals who are interacting with Gen AI for religious or spiritual reasons can we obtain some initial answers to this very complex question.
And then some people actually argue that right now humans need other humans, but we might be able to grow out of that. Like we actually might be able to develop a relationship with the AI that actually doesn't need other humans, that this need for other humans, we can just kind of like work that out, like that can minimize over time. And that's not my argument by any means, but there are people. So how does this show up in China?
This, the way that tech workers
tech workers view religion and spirituality in China.
Yeah, tech workers in China and the US have similar views on the contested place of religion in the workplace, but they differ when they start to imagine the type of workplace that they are working in and how religion would be incorporated in the type of workplace. And what I mean is that tech workers in China still, by and large, think that they are working in a hierarchical workplace. So when they are thinking about incorporating religion in their tech workplace, they start to be concerned about something that is closer to a form of moral coercion. So I remembered my conversation with a China-based tech worker, and I asked him, do you think it is feasible for us to incorporate some religious ethics into the tech workplace? And he said, I am concerned about it. What if my supervisor is a Christian, but I'm an atheist, and my supervisor wants to introduce some Christian ethics into the tech workplace? Does it mean that I, as an atheist, needs to acknowledge or needs to accept some Christian ethics? because of this hierarchical relationship that they're imagining in their workplace, they start to be concerned about the sense of moral coercion. And in the US, people in general do not share their concerns, at least not in our interviews, do not share their concerns about the hierarchical workplace. What they are concerned about is how the conservative moral and political discourses articulated by religion may be in tension with the liberal and the progressive moral and the political discourses articulated by the tech industry. It does not mean that all organized religion articulate conservative moral or political discourses, but it indicates that when US-based tech workers are imagining what religion is, they tend to associate religion with these organized religions that articulate conservative moral and political discourses.
Oh, interesting.
So they're worrying about these inconsistencies between a set of conservative moral discourses versus a set of liberal discourses. And the workaround that they came up with is what I call in my book, assigning ethical authority to themselves. So they think that religious ethics can be helpful, but it has to be tech workers themselves making a decision on what elements of religious ethics that they want to incorporate in their workplace and what are the elements that they want to exclude from their workplace.
So how do you think we deal with ethics in AI then? Like, do we trust the tech companies, the AI companies, to just work that out for themselves? Or what in your vision of what would be the best possible outcome? How would we organize around this new superintelligence that's emerging and some assessment of how ethical it is or not ethical it is?
Yeah, that's a super complex question.
Oh, that's an easy question.
That's one of the most complex questions. And I do not think I am able to provide you with a comprehensive answer, because that will require year-long, decades-long conversations among stakeholders in different social entities to come up with a really comprehensive answer to such a question. But what I can tell from the information that I collected from tech workers is that even tech workers themselves are concerned about ethics in their industry. And to be really transparent, at least in my interviews, many tech workers do not trust that tech companies are able to come up with a comprehensive ethical guidelines that will lead towards a good use of technology, which makes the society a better place. But what I also found is that while these tech workers have ethical concerns on how these tech companies engage with the future development of technology, they usually do not explicitly resist these ethically problematic practices. And in my work, I argue that tech workers whom I interview manifest a sense of very subtle ethical agency. They have their disagreement, but they are more comfortable sharing their disagreement in a private setting rather than being vocal about their true ethical concerns or resisting an ethically problematic assignment from their supervisors. And I asked them why you have such subtle ethical disagreement with your company and your industry. And the reason that they gave me is, for one, they believe that ethics is not high on the priority list in the industry. Rather, money is high on the priority list in the industry. So related, they are also concerned about whether their ethical concerns may lead towards actual change in the industry. So they are feeling a sense of powerlessness, and also due to other structural constraints that they have, such as a fear of retaliation from their companies, they tend to suppress their own voices. Circulating back to your question on whether we can trust the tech companies to develop ethical framework, I'm not able to answer that question, but I know that the tech workers whom I interview will say probably not. Tech companies should not be the only stakeholders to decide what ethical guidelines should look like, and there should be at least some sort of collaborations from multiple stakeholders in the society.
That's beautiful. So here's my idea. I don't think you can trust them. And it's not because they don't care. It's a little bit like the way I see the current AI world is a little bit like a mom with single mom raising 5 kids. And you ask the mom, do you care about the world? I'm like, of course I care about the world, but I got 5 freaking kids to feed. Like, how am I going to put any time to this? So there's this race, AI race, so they all have like 5 kids. They're all trying to build. So they care, but it's just not the priority or the time and attention necessarily in the structure that it's in. So so why not develop a wisdom council of people from various walks of life and backgrounds, and then creates the ethical guidelines with people who are, deeply, deeply knowledgeable about what those are, and then provide them to all the different AI companies so that they don't have to do this work and everyone's kind of on an equal playing field. Because I don't think the government can do it, and I think the AI companies are just moving too fast and have too many balls in the air to kind of put my attention to it. But then you have to say, well, what is the motivation for them to do this? And I think inevitably over time, people are going to want the most trustworthy AI to use, right? If an AI is not supporting their well-being, they're going to want to know, like, this one has values and this one doesn't have values. So the argument would be like, oh, the more that we can increase this, the more people that will actually trust your AI. So I don't think they're necessarily bad people, although I think there are some bad people. But I think if we look at what happened with social media, everyone was like, oh, they'll just figure it out and they mean well. And it's like, I don't think that worked out so well. I don't know if anybody's like, yeah, social media, oh, it worked really good for our children. I don't know, maybe a few people, but like the majority of people are like, yeah, we didn't really handle that well. I kind of wished early on we had created some standards around algorithms and the images our kids are seeing. And so I do think there's some lessons there, even though it's a different technology, because that was in an ad-based system, so I understand that within an ad-based system, there's different incentives. I think one of the interesting things about the current technologies which we're talking about is Meta, for example, will optimize for time on the platform. So the algorithm will optimize for whatever it is that keeps you looking at the platform more. Whatever activates you, whether it's hope or fear or something, it just keeps feeding whatever that is that keeps you on the platform, because that's the goal. The new AI algorithms are not optimizing for attention necessarily. They're optimizing for giving you an answer for something that you're coming there seeking. So it's a different model, right?
Yeah.
But it still needs to have ethics. And so what do those ethics look like, I think, is maybe the most important question we could be asking. And I think from the lessons from social media, I think realizing that we need to play a part. I don't think it's fair just to let them deal with that.
Yeah, it's indeed a different model, and the ethical concerns becomes a little bit different. With social media, in our previous conversations about tech ethics, we are concerned more about how the algorithms on social media make people addictive to social media platforms, and how the algorithms on social media distribute targeted advertisement based on people's gender and racial identities, which reinforce all these different types of biases. And now I can imagine that when users interact with a Gen AI chatbot, they are imagining a slightly different entity, and the Gen AI chatbot is the sort of entity that carries some sort of cultural authority. It is a source of authority that provides you with the information. So our previous discussions about tech ethics surrounds how social media are trying to manipulate the algorithms in order to generate more revenue growth. But the current discussions on ethics surrounding AI may need to focus a little bit more on how people view AI as a source of authority, and to what extent AI companies or these companies that are developing all these models can be accountable for the authoritative information that they provide to the users. Of course, I know that in these Gen AI chatbots, there is always this caveat AI can generate inaccurate information. But what truly matters is how users are imagining the authority of AI, not just to what extent AI actually has authority in terms of the information that it provides.
No, I get that. And so one of the things Yuval Harari brings up is he's like, I can understand why the platform company shouldn't be responsible for individual posts that people make, because like that's just free speech and that's a lot for them to monitor. But it should be held responsible for the things that they choose to then put in, highlight, and propagate within the sphere. So if it's propagating something that's harmful or misleading, they should be held responsible for that. And right now they're like, we can't be held responsible, so some user did it, but you chose to highlight it and bring it forth. And I think a lot of the AI leaders I talk to say, don't put us in that bucket of the social media companies. Like, we're not that. We're different. Like, don't say tech CEOs, because like we're different leaders than those people. We're actually trying to solve that problem. Because that problem is right now you search for a salmon recipe and you click it and there's like 10,000 ads before you actually get to the recipe. We'll just actually give you the recipe, and it's like it actually helps people save their time because they're not in this this crazy world of ads that old search engines would support, right? We just give you the information. So they see themselves rightly or wrongly as like trying to give people more accurate information directly without going through the maze of all the ads that are on the internet. So, but the question still remains, which is just like, what does ethics look like, and how does ethics not come from a top down, you should do this, and here's the righteous way to do it, but some kind of collaborative approach to understanding. And I'm curious, I have a lot of concern about this, and most of my concern comes from watching social media and realizing we kind of acted too late, and what would it be to act? And I'm curious, you've already kind of answered this question. What are the questions we should be asking, do you think, to handle AI from an ethical standpoint as soon as we can, so 2 years from now we don't look back and be like, wow, that would have been kind of cool if we had acted sooner?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts and very initial thoughts. The first thought is about, so when I'm thinking about people getting information from Gen AI chatbot or AI models, I tend to situate them in more concrete use cases. And the concrete use cases that I am currently thinking about is how the faithful individuals rely on Gen AI for questions related to religion and spirituality. And if AI entrepreneurs or the individuals who are developing the technology care about the authority and accuracy of this information, then one thing that they may consider doing is talking with the individuals who are having this sense of authority in our face-to-face real world, such as religious leaders, working with religious leaders and see to what extent the information is aligned with the training that these religious leaders provide, what is lost in these interactions with AI, and what can be added in people's interaction with AI. And the second thought that I have is related to our earlier conversation about tech workers' subtle ethical agency. And if we look the discussion of tech ethics on news or social media, what we can see is that there are discussions about tech ethics, but from a small group of individuals in our societies, policymakers, social scientists who care about AI, a few tech entrepreneurs who are vocal about an AI ethics or tech ethics. But what is actually happening is that these individuals who are working in their day-to-day jobs on the development of technology do not want to voice their ethical concerns. But if we do private conversations with them, we will realize that they do have extensive ethical concerns about technology. So is there a way to empower these tech workers and encourage them to voice their concerns? Or is there a way to establish healthy dialogues between, let us say, tech entrepreneurs and their employees in the discussion of tech ethics? And this circulate back to your ideas on having a wisdom panel, right? Because tech entrepreneurs need to be incentivized to have such conversations with their employees. And the question is, how can we provide them with these incentives?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I sometimes talk to my AI when I'm driving, because I'm driving, I was like, talk to my AI. And I find it enormously useful. So I'll like get health advice from my AI, I'll get like investment advice from my AI, I'll get relationship advice from my AI, all these different things. And so I was driving the other day, and I can't remember the particular topic, but it's like really, really helpful information. And I was like, can you send this to me, information? Can you send this to me? And the AI is like, sure. I was like, can you email it to me? It's like, absolutely. What's your email address? I'm like, here's my email. Can you send it to me? She's like, whatever. It's like, sure, right away. And I was like, that's cool. Could you send me this other thing? It's like, cool. Actually, yeah, helpful, right away. And then I see there was nothing coming in. I was like, why didn't I get my email? She's like, oh, I can't email you. I was like, hold it, you just told me twice that you could email me. Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, hold it, I'm taking advice from you on all these other things, and you tell me you can't even figure out whether you can email me anything or not. So I think there's an interesting authority role where we make assumptions that might be really interesting to assume that it's like a professor that knows a lot about one thing but actually knows nothing about another topic, and you're asking the physics professor about relationships, and he or she's giving you all this advice. You're like, hold it, you don't know nothing about this.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you humanize the AI, and to an extent that you suddenly realize it
Yeah.
is not a human being.
Yeah.
It is a set of algorithms that can make mistakes and can give you the empty promises of sending information to your email.
I'm still waiting for the email.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did this with another, I'm not going to name the engine, but the engine, I asked for some quotes, and there were several quotes that were incorrect. And I said, hold it, I don't think this quote is correct. And it said, absolutely, you're right. I'm so sorry. Here's another quote, but I'm really apologize. That quote was not correct. I looked it up. I was like, you just told me that. Oh my God, I am so sorry. I'll work to earn your trust again. And I was like, so interesting. Like it's almost there, but it's not really there.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm trusting it more and more. Like I'm actually finding myself trusting it more and more. And I don't know if that's healthy. And I also wonder sometimes whether I should just call a friend and talk to my friend on my drive. Yes, I should talk to my friend on my drive. But see, if I ask my friend, for example, I say, could you do a search of authoritarian regimes in the last 100 years and come up with a synopsis in 2 minutes about what topples authoritarian regimes, and we can talk about it? I don't have friends who can do that. But the AI is like, sure, here's based on the 10 authoritarian regimes of this century, here's what happened. And I'm like, so I love that aspect of it, because it's like, that would take me a long time to figure out. So we just have a few minutes left. Any other thoughts, what would I say you're most curious or passionate about now? And we can have you back a future year to talk about, like, what is the area of study that is most passionate for you right now?
Yeah, hopefully I will be able to come back in a few years and share some updated research.
Please.
And there are two areas about the intersection between spirituality, religion, and AI that mostly interest me. And the first area is what will happen as people increasingly rely on AI for religion-related or spirituality-related information. And we talked a little bit about these questions in our earlier conversation. And we need to know that from the perspective of users, from the perspectives of people who are developing these algorithms, and from the perspectives of other stakeholders who are involved in this ecosystem. And the second question that I am curious about is what will happen to religion if people start to be increasingly concerned about their job security with the growth of AI? Early on, you mentioned that you ask AI to provide you with the information when you commute. And this should be the job that is done by a podcast. And with the growth of AI, maybe people's jobs are increasingly in this position of being increasingly replaced by AI. And I also wonder how people would cope with this uncertainty. Does it mean that in a society such as Silicon Valley, one of the most secular places in the United States from a traditional sense, people start to increasingly rely on religion and spirituality to cope with all these insecurities and uncertainties that they experience with AI? These are the two research questions that I am the most curious about.
And I think one of the interesting things is it used to be, for example, computer science was very safe. And Jensen from NVIDIA is like, no, we're not. We're building an AI that's like, you're not safe anymore, because the AI is actually going to be able to do all the stuff that computer science, and Dario from Anthropic and Zuckerberg from Meta have all said that like the AI now is doing a lot of the engineering work and will increasingly do more and more. So I don't know if anybody is safe. So I do think it'll be really interesting to see what the backlash to AI is as it takes over more jobs, and how the society manages to figure out what a responsible, I don't know if it's an AI tax, or like how do you manage in a society where there is a new superintelligence that works 24/7 and can like process things faster than humans can? Like, what do we do about that? I think your research and study, I think, is spot on, because I think spirituality and meaning and purpose is like core. And if we can figure out how we can sustain that in our culture, I think that's like wonderful, because we have all the greatest AI, but if we're lonely and disconnected and depressed and not doing well, like who cares? Like, so we know everything about everything and we're lonely and depressed. Like, I don't think that helps. So just a deep bow to you for your work and kind of trying to understand how our views of spirituality and religion in an AI world can change.
That's true. Yeah, thank you. The world of AI may need additional, even more conversations about religion and spirituality.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Didi.
Thank you.
Yeah.